Welcome. We're going to jump around with questions. Trustee Butel will start.
Mrs. Perdue, thank you for being here. The first question is, please tell us why you are interested in joining the Rochester School Board at this time and what skills, experiences, or qualities make you a good fit for this position.
Sure. I'm just finishing up an appointment as the president and past president of an international organization devoted to writing
Can you pull that just a little closer?
Sure.
Yeah.
To literacy. And I loved the opportunity to meet people from all over the world and work for them on initiatives that are, go across different countries. But I live in Rochester, and some of the best times I had were when I was on the PTSA, working with parents and students doing reflections. And I care a lot about education. I have a PhD in educational leadership, and I teach teachers. I also teach first-year students. I think that the schools, the K through 12 schools, they help create college-ready students, and at universities, we're trying to create student-ready colleges, so I like the idea of the reciprocity. And I know at different times you've had a lot of, OU people and other college people on the board, but I thought I could bring a perspective as a higher educator who also has had a lot of work experience with nonprofits. I'm also somebody who tends to like to work across the aisle. I like to understand why people take a different perspective. As I tell my students all the time, every day in life, you're confronted with issues and challenges for which there isn't a perfect answer. You're gonna have incomplete information. The key is to use what you can gather, and at some point you'll have to make a decision. And you have to be prepared to see how it gets operationalized, and if there is a problem, be ready to redirect. And that's been my approach to leadership. I'm not a micromanager. A school board position is not a superintendent position, and a superintendent is not a micromanager. I'm not suggesting that, but I think I offer insights about how to work together and about many of the issues that the school is looking at in terms of curriculum. And I bring a perspective of somebody who's had a lot of years in education, but I think you have a lot of terrific candidates. And I also am researching generative AI, which is an issue that is increasingly confronting K through 12 educators. And I've figured out ways to use it effectively with my students and teach generative AI literacy, which isn't so much how to use it, but how to understand the things you need to ask before you use it and why you can't outsource your thinking to it. I can use it a lot more than they can because I already know how to do a lot of those things. And so we do scenarios and things. And I think I would bring that attention to those issues that I've already researched to the, to the curriculum and the policy.
Thank you. Rochester Schools is considered by many to be one of the best districts in the state. However, some say we are a district in decline. What is your view? Is RCS a premier school district, a district in decline, or would you use some other description? And on what do you base that opinion?
Yeah, and I think that's an issue that many schools are dealing with. Like most districts, Rochester experienced post-COVID learning decline, particularly in areas like literacy and student engagement. And what stands out to me is how the district has responded. I think the strategic plan reflects a strong focus on data-informed instruction, targeted literacy. I really was impressed with the focus on reading and grounded in science, and systems that are also going to allow the educators to be motivated and to have data early enough that they can respond. Because a lot of times in K through 12 education, you get the data at the end of the year. And it'll tell you where a student is at, but it doesn't tell you where they injured. So that student may have gone up 2 grade levels, but it looks like maybe they're not a success because they're not at grade level. The approach that you're taking, according to what I was, the data that I pulled together, shows that you're trying to get data in the hands of teachers earlier, and also to reward those educators so that they want to stay. And because that's a big problem across the board, and it's here too, is educators leaving the field. I know our scores are high, but I also always look at the scores of the students who aren't doing well. And I think a lot gets focused on literacy, and of course that's my jam. I'm a writing center director and a researcher, but I look at those math scores too. And I want to see us improve, but I think we do that with a strategic plan that really focuses on those 5 pillars that you've identified. So I would say Rochester isn't a school in decline. It's a school facing challenges that are similar to other high-performing districts and those that haven't been historically high-performing. And it's really important that we look at what schools that are having success are doing, but also always tailor it to our own community. Context is everything. So I'd say you're doing the things that you need to, because we don't want those numbers to keep going down.
What are the top 2 or 3 challenges that Rochester Schools is facing, and what ideas do you have to address those challenges?
Well, I think one of them is communication. I think we have to, and it comes from the top all the way down. I think it's important that transparency always be the standard. My mom, when I was a little girl, always told me, avoid all appearance of evil. They were pretty, Christian conservative, but I grew up in that, always avoid evil, by the phrasing evil. So always try to make sure that you anticipate the way your decisions and your interactions with other people are gonna be viewed, and think about it, try to turn around and look at yourself from your audience's perspective. And because I'm a rhetorician and I study audience, I think that we can improve communication, and it's been hard. It's been hard across the globe, and it's not a new thing. People have moved to the polls, far left, far right, wrong. And what we need to do, and I'm not saying it's just a Rochester problem, because it's not, but we really need to work on looking at each other, talking to one another, asking questions with goodwill, and communicating to the constituency why we make the decisions and how we base them. And I'm not saying you weren't doing those things, but I think that's an important challenge for the district. And we're a changing and growing district. So we have to keep reevaluating what are the needs. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they said, it just seems like every kid has ADHD or this. And I said, yeah, we're inundated with information from every direction. And it sometimes feels like you don't know where to focus your attention. You take a brain that is under 25 years old, hasn't developed impulse control yet, and it is a harder environment in which to help people learn. And so I guess I'm talking more global than local here. I think we're facing the same challenges that a lot of schools are facing, but we see it from the inside because we're in Rochester. So I don't think we're particularly odd or particularly unique in these challenges, but I think we have so many resources. And I liked the fact that the strategic plan was informed by focus groups and other things, and I think that's something that the school can do to keep improving. So I kind of went around your question a little bit and talked more about the challenges I think schools in general are facing, but I think those are 2.
After review and discussion of issues, the board operates by a majority vote of trustees. When the majority vote is different from your position, how would you handle that?
Yeah, and I think that's life, right? I'm not queen of the world. I don't want to be. Sometimes people have information that I didn't have, and let's face it, sometimes there are just more people who vote one way than mine. Maybe the approach that I was going to take could have yielded more fruit, but we ultimately have to make that decision. It's based on incomplete information, and we're human beings. I don't want to be right. I want to do what's right for kids, for the district, for the families here. And that means that you work together. And at the end of the day, you know, you finish the voting, you walk out, you so-called win some, lose some, and then you shake hands and you go out and you remember these are good people who are giving a lot of their time. And I would think in most cases, their decisions were very thoughtful and they were based on the facts and ideas that they were able to pull together, and I'll go for the next one.
Thanks so much for coming out and interviewing this evening. RCS serves a diverse group of students. What should the board do to ensure that every student, regardless of ability, background, identity, characteristics, not only receives a top-notch education, but also feels a sense of belonging in this school district?
And I think that's a key concept. In the last 20 years, we've really heard that sense of belonging come up more and more. And, you know, I've had the opportunity to talk to people of different beliefs about issues like gender and everything. And I always come back to this. I want kids to see themselves in their setting. I want them to see themselves in school. I want them to have a sense that they're not alone. There might be issues of identity that I didn't understand or I haven't experienced myself, but I don't want kids to die. I don't want them to hate themselves. I was a kid who was bullied because I was awkward. My therapist once asked me, how do you see yourself? And I said, well, I read this book, The Cat Ate My Jumpsuit, once, and it was about a girl who was awkward, right? And I said, I still often see myself as that awkward middle schooler who thinks too much about things other people don't. And I know that kids who are different from me were just thinking about different things. And we all thought everybody was looking at us. And there are markers of being in life that do make you stand out more and make some people more vulnerable. And I think the district really needs to remember that it's about kids. They're not fully formed yet. They're trying on things, and we want it to be safe for them. We certainly don't want to prescribe what they're gonna be and how they're gonna be, but we wanna give them an opportunity to be in an environment. We can't provide a fully safe environment, but we can encourage civility. I don't think you can teach empathy, but you can hone it. And I've found that when you hear each other's stories, when you give them opportunities to meet people who have come from different circumstances, like I grew up, I was first gen. I wrote a story recently about being that awkward kid and watching my dad, the kind of kid who grew up walking uphill with no food in his belly. When you hear these stories, you're implicated. You no longer see it as us, them. You start to see a kinship, even if you worship differently and you love differently. There's that kinship of, you know what, we're human, and let's encourage these factors, the kids to express kindness to one another, and let's demonstrate it. And I think it has to start with us. We have to remember that everything that we say and everything that we do is modeling for how they're going to interact with each other. And so I always want to remember that every single one of you, I may differ with you on different issues. Maybe, you know, you more than you. I don't know that's true because I don't know either of you. But I know that if we sat down at a table together and we had communion, we saw eye to eye on something, we shared experiences, that I'm less likely to vilify you. And that's what I think we need to do in a district, is to remember that we're not one size fits all. But education policy and justice system, all of those things were designed to fit one size fits all. So it's never gonna be perfect. We're gonna have to do a lot of course correction. The world is different. But ultimately, if we start with modeling that civility, modeling that empathy, and showing students that they matter, that all of them matter, and we show it by the way we treat one another, we're on the right path.
Thank you for coming out, and I apologize, I have a cold, and I apologize, I'm keeping away from everyone. RCS is a public school district. What does the phrase supporting public education mean to you? And what do you think a board trustee should or should not do to support public education?
I thought a lot about that over the years because for my daughter's first formative years, we lived in Flint, and it was what you would call a failing district. And they had brought in different companies to try to reform the school and outsourced a lot of it. And I made a difficult decision as a teacher and as a person who values education to put her in a private school. And I was very, I struggled with that because I knew I had the resources to provide her with what I saw something better, but I also knew that I was changing the dynamic of the people she'd rub elbows with every day at school, and I wanted that. I think the most important thing is that we remember that a free and public education is, I still believe it, I don't mean college education, I mean education is critical to a democratic society. And it's critical to leveling the playing field. That for some kids, my friend was a student teacher at Homedale School in Flint, and I used to go in and do some activities with the kids, and she would tell me stories about some of them hiding underneath the porch over the weekend with the food that the school sent them home with because maybe parents were fighting. Or bringing enough food home for the rest of their family so that they could, and we have to remember that public education allows us to ensure, not that we're policing families or trying to make them into our own image. I would never agree with that, but it allows us a basic infrastructure of support, that we're scaffolding support for humanity. We are investing in the next generation of kids, and that should be as fair and equal as we can make it. And not every member, I remember my daughter did the program where she was assigned to work with a kid who had a lot of needs, and I remember going to this, I think it was the Sparkle Awards, you probably know what I'm talking about, but she came home and she would talk to me about how working in that program made her think about her own gifts and talents and the things she took for granted. And I think that's where public education is at its best. When I was at the meeting, the last meeting, and I watched all those representatives of the different schools come up and talk, that made my heart sing. Watching young people, that was the best part of the meeting, is watching those young people come up and give reports about their school. And I want that available to every student. And I think public education is the most important vehicle for that. So as a board, we want to stand strong and encourage the growth of the best public education that we can provide. And ultimately, I moved here, and she got to go to school in Rochester, and I was able to get involved. Do what you can for those who can't.
Please take the last 30 seconds and tell us anything else you'd like us to know.
I'd just like to thank you for this opportunity and for the work that each of you do. You all play an important role, and I think anyone who gets this position will provide something that you guys need. So thank you.